Okay. Hi, everyone. So thank you for joining today's session. So welcome to our session. It's titled Anti-Racism Education through Collaboration, Effective Education Tools for Children and Youth. So before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the land on which this Zoom session and conference, the P2P, is taking place. We recognize that we are meeting on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Sorry for the pronunciation. We express our gratitude to these nations for the stewardship of their land, and we honor their enduring connections to this place. I'd also like to give the land acknowledgement in French. Avant de commencer, nous aimerions reconnaître le territoire sur lequel se déroule cette session Zoom et cette conférence P2P. Nous reconnaissons que nous nous réunissons sur les territoires traditionnels non cédés des Premières Nations Musqueam, Squamish et Tsleil-Waututh. Je m'excuse pour la prononciation. Nous exprimons notre gratitude à ces nations pour leur gestion de la terre et nous honorons le lien durable qui les unit à ce lieu. As we move forward with today's sessions, we also acknowledge that each speaker will provide their own land acknowledgement, recognizing the unceded territories on which their respective organizations work and are based. We'd also like to remind you that we have a chat option available throughout the session. However, we will be answering questions at the end of each speaker's presentation. So please feel free to share your questions or comments towards the end of the session. Right, so we'll begin with our first speakers. It is my honor to introduce our first speaker, Sherry Fernandez, Executive Director from the South Okanagan Immigrant and Community Services, and Dustin Hyde from the District Principal joining us from the Indigenous Education and Equity. We also have Sungun Kora, who will be a little bit behind the scenes, but still joining us at today's session. Sungun Kora is the Employment Navigator and Diversity and Inclusion Settlement Worker, also from South Okanagan Immigration and Community Services. So we'll begin with the first speaker, so I'll let Sherry take over. And again, if you guys have any questions, please make sure to leave them for the end of the session. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the introduction. Just as Cherry's pulling up the presentation, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement as Dorcas suggested. I am zooming into you today from a little place called Penticton, British Columbia, and it is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Okanagan Si'il people. You can see there in the image, that's the territory on which we reside. We live, work, and play in this beautiful area. And I would be so bold to say, as I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the entire country. And it's just a privilege and honor to call this place my home. And much of our work is dedicated to decolonizing our communities and working to bring truth and reconciliation forward in a meaningful way. And we do that in partnership and collaboration with members of the Penticton Indian Band. So I'd like to start us off that way. I am doing the territory acknowledgement for Seguin and Cherry for our kickoff for our presentation. So next slide, Cherry. We kind of already did quick introductions, so I don't know if we really need to do them. I'm Dustin Hyde, District Principal of Indigenous Education and Equity for School District 67, and I am of Métis and Lheidli T'enneh ancestry and European ancestry on my father's side. And I'll just maybe kick it over real quick to Seguin and Cherry. Cherry, are you good to unmute? Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me say that again. I was just talking to myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Cherry Fernandez. I am with the South Okanagan Immigrant and Community Services, or SOICS for short. I am the executive director here, and I am privileged to have citizenship both with the Philippines and Canada. Before we get into the tools and the resources that we use within our region, I wanted to give you a bit of background of why we got into this work. The communities that we serve are within the South Okanagan-Similkameen region, and this consists of a number of small, rural, and remote communities. Our smallest community is around 200 in population, with the largest being just around 38,000 in Penticton. Last year, we supported about 3,400 clients, and they represent over 120 countries and territories of origin. And if you look at the bottom right hand of the screen, like many settlement organizations, we really experienced a significant growth in the number of needs, the number of clients that sought our supports in the services that we provided. And this was over the pandemic. During this time, we also saw quite an increase in the number of incidences of racism and discrimination. A number of them are quite high profile, and these were just a few coming from these smaller rural and remote communities. What makes it challenging for our community to address the issue is that there is a very strong and persistent denial that it happens in our communities. Quite often, people will point to the larger urban centers or even south of the border and say, nope, nope, that's a problem for those areas. But as you can see, our region is also diverse, and it absolutely experiences incidences of hate. In this slide here, you can see some of these stats we received from the BC Human Rights Commissioner's Office, and they're very specific to our region. So the South Okanagan-Similkameen, and they're only reported incidences. So as you can see here, we experienced over the pandemic an increase of 118 overall hate incidences. 102% are related to race and ethnicity, 74% related to religion, and 47% to gender and sexual orientation. During this time, we also sent out a survey, and we got about 400 respondents, and 74% responded that they never reported the incident that they experienced. And as you can see here, this here only accounts for those that were reported. So the number is actually quite a bit higher. And whether we talk about it or not, there are conversations that are happening. In one incident within our region, there was a freedom convoy that went through, and there was a clash between the protesters and youth, minors, and children at a local school where there were racial slurs being directed to the students. And the reaction, as you can see on the one side here, are coming from the students of where the incidents was pretty much dismissed or just not addressed at all. So this denial is it's very persistent, and I'm going to share with you a short video of one of the speakers that we had come to our community and speak with our local schools. And he's speaking about Penticton and this denial.
Okay, I just got a very disturbing email, but I gotta share it. Now, let me set this up. I'm doing an anti-racism talk later this month in a city called Penticton. And this is the email I received from a concerned citizen. who said, "There is no racism here in Penticton, period. I've lived here since 1965. I and anyone I know has never seen any racism. Please take your divisive lies somewhere else, like Africa, maybe." Well, there's the racism you were looking for. I found it. And the arrogance of a person to say, because I haven't had an experience, no one has. This is like a complete lack of empathy. Empathy, right? When you put yourself in someone else's shoes, when you're curious, what would it be like to be them? When you listen to someone else's experience, this is doing none of that. Like, can you imagine if you and I work in the same office, and let's say we show up at the same time, and I say to you, "Man, traffic was bad this morning." And you say traffic wasn't bad. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, if we're not coming from the same direction, if we're not driving on the same roads, how would you know what traffic is like for me? How about instead of denying my experience, you get curious about it and you say, "Oh, I didn't have that experience. Tell me what it was like for you." Okay, I just got a very
I'll turn it over to Destin at this point.
Thanks, Cherry. And around the same time that Cherry was doing a ton of incredible work in our community around supporting newcomers to our area and the racism that folks were experiencing, School District 67 was engaging in a provincial-wide program called the Equity in Action. And this is the framework that school districts were working their way through. And really, it was an opportunity for us to survey all of our community members, all of our rights holders and our partner groups, and ask them very specific questions around equity. And one of the big glaring trends that we found out when we surveyed students and teachers and support staff and district administrators, one of the key questions that the Equity Committee wanted to ask was essentially, have you ever experienced racism? And if so, what did that look like? And if folks were brave enough and had the courage to share some of those stories, they did. And we collected that data. We had over 750 respondents on a variety of different surveys. And when we got that equity data, it became very apparent that work needed to be done in district for us to support, this reality that our students and our teachers were experiencing racism. So I felt in my first year as a district vice principal that I didn't know where to go and what to do and how to tackle that. So this led to a really beautiful relationship that's evolved over the last 5 years or so, 4.5 years at this point, where I basically called up SOICS and said, "Hey, here's a situation and I could really use some help. And would you mind partnering and brainstorming some ideas?" And it's led to a variety of different initiatives that I'd like to talk you through. So here are some examples of the work that we've partnered on. And again, I really hold my hands up and say thank you, Limlim in the local in Tsilhqot'in language, to Cherry and SOICS. None of these things could have been done without the helps of SOICS. So we created right off the gates there after we did our equity survey, we wanted to create virtual learning sessions for teachers and educators. That was like right in year one after we finished the equity data. And then a whole bunch of the other pieces we created over the last couple of years, professional development series that we've promoted and we have teachers participating in. Every professional development day that we offer here in British Columbia and in our district, we got teachers engaging in that. We reached out to parents and had parent engagement sessions to, one, provide awareness around the work that we were doing and the commitment that we had to tackling this issue, but also to gather feedback from parents in terms of what they would like to see. And then information sheets that were delivered to every single school in the district around how parents and educators could chat about racist incidents and hate speech, as Cherry had mentioned earlier, with students. All of those were things that we've done, and a few more, I think, on the next slide as well, Cherry.
Yes, so if you take a look at it here, this is what Dustin's referring to, an example of that, the information sheets that go out to parents and teachers about how to talk and have these conversations, because really they're looking for tools of how do we approach these conversations, because whether or not you are having it with them, it is happening, these conversations. Something that we worked on with our region, in partnership with UBC, is putting up a reporting portal, because at this time there was nothing. If something were, an incident was to happen, there wasn't any information on where you can get supports, information on how to report. So we came together as a region, created this portal, and the incidents were then forwarded to the various settlement organizations within our region. And this was promoted through the schools as well as the RCMP. They have this information to share out as well. One of the first things that we did was create the anti-racism handbook, because it's overwhelming. There is a lot of information there. So we compiled it all within one book, providing resources. Yes, some of them are national and provincial, but there's a number of them that are very much local as well. Resources that people can turn to do more learning, how to report is all available there. And again, in the bottom right, we started promoting a lot of the immigrant stories as well, sharing what that journey is like, about the successes and what it brings to our community. But I would say one of our biggest initiatives that got a lot of traction is our Unbox project. The Unbox project was inspired by You Need This Box, coming out of Alberta. And what it is, it's a self-contained kit that gives a number of learnings, reflections, activities that you can do on your own or as a group to really learn about what is racism, what does it mean to be anti-racist, and it takes the participant through looking at our communities, because the information here is very much localized to the specific community we're delivering it in. And it takes them through looking at their community through another lens and really thinking critically, is this a safe place for all people? And from this box, we worked with Dustin and we expanded it. We now have an Unbox that lives in the libraries of all the schools and is delivered to all grade 6 students. And it supplements what the teachers do in their classrooms. It gives them a number of different activities, learning projects, readings that they can work through with their classroom. And we are now working to expand it even further so that it's available for primary students as well as high school students. We're really looking at targeting it to grade 3 and grade 9 students for the next iteration. Dustin, did you want to add anything about that?
I don't think so, Cherry. I mean, you've nailed it. I mean, the big thing was in British Columbia, for folks that don't know, we don't have anti-racism education formally embedded directly into curriculum. So teachers were feeling like maybe a bit apprehensive and like, hey, this isn't in the curriculum. So part of my job coming out of my office was to share some of the stories that people were sharing with us and, you know, make Cherry aware, you know, in terms of all the other schools administrators, at the work that they were doing, and then the partnership that we had. So now, like Cherry had said, we got it in every school. Every grade 6 students last year formally made their way through anti-racism education, and our goal will be to do the same this year for our grade 3s and our grade 9s. Last couple of slides, just conscious of our time here. The other big thing that we've done is last year we brought in an anti-racism keynote speaker, and this individual did 3 presentations at all 3 of our high schools. And you can see this is Jesse Lipscomb. We had Anthony McLean in a smaller setting the year before. We're actually bringing him back this year, and he's going to be at all 3 of our high schools. But we've really heard loud and clear from community members in our school, parents and students alike, that having anti-racism educational learning opportunities in the way of whole school presentations and then the follow-up conversations has been really, really well received. So we're continuing that momentum. And again, if you read through those quotes, it's very, very powerful learning and really sparks great conversations in terms of anti-racism education and the work that's ahead of school administrators in their respective buildings. And then I'll just pass it back to Cherry for the last slide.
Yes. So earlier I talked about why as an organization we got into this work. For many of us, there is also a personal reason why we do this work. There's lived experience. And I want to encourage everyone here that you don't need to have a large budget to get into this work. The video you're now going to see, it was really done through trial and error. We had a message that we wanted to share with our community over the pandemic. We didn't have a budget for it, but our youth from one of our youth crew said, you have a camera. Why don't you just film it? So truly through trial and error and holding up blankets, because we didn't know that the sound of the wind could be really loud, we produced this video. And it's actually very personal to me because it's inspired by my own daughter. When she was turning 3 years old and starting to interact with kids her age, and she entered into the preschool. And this little girl who can speak both in English and Tagalog became so quiet that her teachers thought she couldn't speak yet. And it wasn't until months later that I discovered why. When she asked me the question, "Mommy, do you like being brown?" that I realized that there was a cycle and it was now impacting my daughter. So I'd like to share this with you. And it was done through partnerships and collaborations in our region.
Mommy, you like being brown?
The country that this is stepping on toes.
Why don't
You have a
I?
workshop in Ellsberg, why would you bother coming here?
I live in a service.
So what?
So what?
The ER nurse is referring to disturbing allegations involving medical staff in emergency rooms playing racially motivated games. Person, you know, what are you going to the rest?
Mommy, you like being brown?
Baby, what do you see?
I see you, Mom.
What do you see?
My accent, my culture, my appearance, my name.
This is not my whole story.
I am your neighbor. I build your home and workplaces. I make sure your space are clean and safe. I grow your food.
I bring your food to you.
I am looking for it.
I am business owner.
I create jobs.
I help you manage your education. I celebrate art.
I give back to the community.
I care for you.
I am a lifesaver.
I'm on the front line for you.
I provide guidance.
To listen and offer comfort.
I am a teacher. I empower the next generation. I create innovation.
Peaceful possibilities.
We are connected.
I am Kamloops.
I am Salmon Arm.
I am Vernon.
I am Kelowna. I am Pitchland. I am Summerland. I am Penticton.
I am Oliver.
I am the Swiss.
I see you.
I am Martin.
Father,
Sister.
My brother.
daughter,
Son. Mentor. Friend.
I am your neighbor. I am your neighbor. I am your neighbor.
I am your neighbor.
I see you. Mommy, you like being brown?
Baby, I'm proud to be brown. But I am not alone. You are not alone. This is our community. These are our neighbors. Neighbors that will not be silent, but take a stand and make us stronger together. Color makes life beautiful. We are all connected. Our diversity makes us stronger together. Why fear our differences? Instead, share, learn, and appreciate the strength we have in our connection. To those that lift us up in times of crisis and uncertainty. To those that do their part every day, where we work, learn, play, live. To those that recognize and value connection. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us this time to share a bit about what we do in our community. And what I forgot to mention earlier, if you'd like any of the resources that we talked about, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to share those along. And you can use that and customize it as you need for your communities. Thank you. I will pass it now to Carmen and Dorcas.
So that was an amazing session. I think a lot of information and resources were shared with everyone. So again, Sungun, Kara did put them in the chat, so feel free to look into those. We're just going to take a few seconds. If anybody has any questions for Sherry based on the session we just had, or any questions for Dustin. No? Okay. Oh, I think we got a question in the Q&A. Oh, they're just asking for the list of resources. They will be resharing the information in the chat as well, and I'm sure they're going to leave their contact information at the end of the session or their website, so we can always refer back to that. We have a comment from Melissa for the team. That was really great. That was really, really great. Just wanted to say thank you for sharing. Good. Okay, so I agree that was a great session. We are going to save some time at the end again for any other questions or comments. But I would also like to thank the team for their amazing session and all the work and effort that they did. So thank you for such a meaningful and insightful session. And again, we're going to transition by talking more about the importance of anti-racism rhetoric in our communities, especially rural communities. So it is important to acknowledge that we do see color, that we do see differences, and also important to acknowledge and use the resources that we have to facilitate important or tough conversations around that subject. Right, so I'm honored to be the chair of this session and also a speaker today. I'm representing my organization, the New Brunswick Multicultural Council, also known as NBMC. I'm an instructor there, so I provide diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings in rural areas of New Brunswick, and also at times with different organizations and communities. And NBMC is obviously promoted to fostering inclusivity and anti-racism education across our communities. NBMC is committed to also upholding our bilingualism by fostering an inclusive environment that supports the use and development of multi-languages, in this case specifically French and English. So please feel free to, towards the end of the session, ask your question in either English and French, and it will be answered in the language in which you ask your question. Additionally, for this session, you will have the option on clicking whether you want the French version of the presentation or the English version of the presentation on your devices. So please feel free to use those tools. Today, we will be speaking about specifically our anti-racism toolkit that we developed. It's a comprehensive and effective resource designed to support educators and high school students in creating inclusive, equitable environments in schools. So I'm also pleased to be joined by Carmen Baudilien, our director at the New Brunswick Multicultural Council, who brings years of experience and has supported and led numerous projects focused on fostering inclusion and diversity at NBMC. Carmen will share valuable insight into our work and highlight the efforts that NBMC has made, as well as a bit of backstory on the toolkit itself and its creation. So I am going to pass it on to Carmen to add any introductions to herself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken. So yes, my name is Carmen Baudilien, and I'm one of the directors at the New Brunswick Multicultural Council. And I'm specifically working on intersectionality initiative and also members initiatives. As mentioned by Dorcas, we are an umbrella organization. So we do not do direct services ourselves. So our members who are ethnocultural association and settlement agencies, they are the one who are providing the services. But our role is to represent our members. So we do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the sector with our provincial government and also federal government. And we also develop, for example, trainings, we develop programming, we develop toolkits that can then be passed on to them and support them in their work. So this is a little bit about the work that we're doing. J'aimerais également mentionner que on est bilingue, Dorcas et moi. Donc, mon nom c'est Carmen Baudilien et je suis la directrice des initiatives sur l'intersectionnalité et également les initiatives aux membres. Donc, si jamais vous avez des questions en français, donc on va vous partager une trousse d'outils en français et en anglais. Mais la présentation va être principalement en anglais, mais n'hésitez pas à poser vos questions en français aussi. I will let Dorcas do the line acknowledgement for where we work from.
Right, so we're going to go to the next slide and just give our land acknowledgement. So, nous aimerions reconnaître que le terre sur lequel nous organisons cette séance d'information et cette conférence est située dans les territoires non cédés, c'est-à-dire le territoire traditionnel des Musqueam, Squamish et Tsleil-Waututh. Les NBMC aimeraient commencer par reconnaître la terre sur laquelle nous travaillons, vivons et jouons sur le territoire traditionnel non cédé des peuples Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet et Passamaquoddy. So NBMC would like to start off by recognizing that the land on which we work and play and live on is a traditional non-ceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, Wolastoqiyik, and Passamaquoddy peoples. I'm going to go to the next slide.
Okay. Donc, je vais continuer. Le Conseil multiculturel a été fondé en 1983. Puis, on est la plus ancienne donc organisme cadre en Atlantique à but non lucratif et on soutient 20 membres à travers la province. Donc, I just want to start by a little bit of history. So, New Brunswick Multicultural Council, as mentioned, was funded in 1983. We're one of the oldest umbrella organizations in Atlantic, and we support 20 member agency across New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So I just want to share with you a little bit of the map of New Brunswick. So as you can see, we have 3 major cities. So for those who are not familiar with the province, we are a very small province and very rural. So one of the ruralest province per capita in Canada as well. We only have 3 bigger centers. So there's Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton, and all of the other areas are pretty rural. So some of the member agencies have 2 staff and some of them have 10 staff working in the settlement agency. So it's very rural. Also, New Brunswick has experienced the immigration history of Quebec or Ontario or BC. So for us in New Brunswick, immigration is fairly new. So we had some waves of immigration. So for example, like in the 90s with the Eastern European countries, so there was a little bit of wave there, but it has not impacted as much, or we haven't seen as much reaction to it because it was mainly European white people coming with probably the same belief, the same religion. So it wasn't as predominant. So when we've seen an increase is with the Syrian refugee arrivals. So that has had a little bit of impact on the province because it was the first time for them to be exposed to a complete different culture, language, and system of belief. And we have also experienced in the past 2 years of per capita, a lot of growth when it comes to immigration, specifically with the critical worker program established by IRCC, but also the AIP program, the Atlantic Immigration Program. So again, New Brunswick immigration for us is very new. We've seen a boom, and then there's also a reaction to this boom. Next slide, please. So we had a commissioner on systemic racism that was appointed in 2021. And she wanted to do a little bit of a survey to see what is the state of our province, because there's a lot of changes happening in New Brunswick. And then we see hate going up, and we see a lot of kind of systemic racism. It's a little bit more taking de l'ampleur, so becoming a little bit more serious. So she was mandated to write a report on the incidents that occur in New Brunswick. So she published her report in 2022. With a series of recommendations for government. And she also met with the New Brunswick Multicultural Council and highly advised us to continue our work with EECD, so the Education Department. So we have 2 in New Brunswick, the Francophone, Ministère de l'Éducation et de la Petite Enfance, and the Anglophone Education Department. So she said, you know, we really need to get into schools, and education is very important to address systemic racism. And so we developed a toolkit in partnership with her. So after she finished her mandate as the Commissioner on Systemic Racism and she published her report, we developed this toolkit together for educators and also youth. And this toolkit has been based on real stories that she heard and she published in her report. The other thing that the New Brunswick Multicultural Council does is we have developed an anti-racism training in partnership with Jody Glynn Mitchell, who also works at the University of Toronto. So we're also creating that awareness with our training into GNB, which is the government of New Brunswick. So we're also giving training to public servants to be able to create that awareness. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just gonna continue here in English. So the main components of the toolkit, it has three main components. So recognizing the signs of racism. So there are different signs of racism. So in the toolkit at the end, and we will share the toolkit shortly in the chat because we will do a little bit of an exercise with you today, is very important to name, to recognize, to put definitions to it, because otherwise we cannot find a solution, we cannot find a strategy. So there are many different forms of racism, including microaggression, macroaggression, stereotyping, racial profiling, and segregation, just to name a few. So in this toolkit, at the end, the educators have a full section that they can introduce in their classes. So what are the different terminologies? And then the second component of the toolkit is the empowerment and motivation. So empowerment involves believing in your ability to act and make a difference. So it combines personal agency and self-motivation that are aligned with your values, but also with your social responsibilities. So these factors drive proactively a community engagement. And then we have the different strategies that Dorcas, my colleague, will talk about it here. But knowing and practicing bystander strategy not only helps to bring about a positive result to harmful situations, but also to keep the bystander safe. So again, there's different strategies. We call them the 5 Ds, and I will let my colleague introduce them, but there's different strategies of being a proactive bystander. Next slide, please.
Okay, good. So I did share the anti-racism toolkit in the chat. There are 2 different types of aggressions that we acknowledge and we recognize in our toolkits. The first one being microaggressions. So microaggressions are defined as the subtle, could be day-to-day interactions. Sometimes they're unintentional. Sometimes people think they're jokes or funny, but they're geared towards marginalized people. And an example of microaggression could be, for example, somebody feeling the need to, ask, where you're from, or feeling the need to touch your hair, or make comments on your skin tone, or your ethnic appearance, physical features. And sometimes these could be very subtle. Again, these are very sneaky, we like to call them sneaky ways to, aggress somebody. And of course, these were recently recognized as, people have always done microaggressions, but it's only recently that we've been able to put a word to it. Another disclaimer that I'd like to make is that the word microaggression is under some sort of criticism just because of the word micro. It tends to make it seem as if it's minimal, but microaggressions can add up and it can be very frustrating, especially if you're experiencing it day to day, either at work or at school. So micro is not a way to say that these are small or insignificant negative experiences. They do add up and they are quite impactful. The next type of aggression we'd like to quote is macroaggression. So this is from a larger scale. It's more direct, overt racism in your face. So we were able to see in Sherry's presentation a few examples of macroaggression. So, using slurs, using, certain, creating policies even, or laws that target specific marginalized groups or marginalized people. So bans for traditional clothes or religious clothes, that's a microaggression. Using slurs to address someone is a macroaggression. So microaggressions are not as subtle. They're very direct, they're in your face, they're overt, and it's not something that you would say accidentally, for example. So those are the two types of aggressions that we recognize in our toolkits. And it's very important to understand these two aggressions because, of course, the more you know about these things, the more you're able to address your own biases, but also correct the ones around you or acknowledge the aggressions that might be made around you. We're going to go to the next slide, please. So one of the ways that we deal with racism in our toolkit is addressing ways that bystanders can intervene in micro or macro racist scenarios. So, of course, there are different approaches to this. We like to call them our 5 Ds. So the first one is a direct approach. So this one is more of an approach that's probably planned out. It's not subtle. You're going to tell the person, you're going to confront. It's very direct. The other one is delay. So if you see that somebody is in a harmful situation or whatever the case may be, you may try to create some sort of delay in order to help diffuse the situation. The next one is distract. So you could be distracting the person that's creating the microaggression in order to kind of avert the situation. The next one is probably one of my favorite ones because in my opinion, it's the safest, which is document. So, one thing that we have today is phones. Please use your phones. You can film, you can text somebody, you can call, you can make a live stream about what's going on. And documenting is not only using your phones to film, but it could also be constantly writing down micro and macro aggressions that you're facing either in the workplace or in school. So you could write down, okay, September 15th, I got this comment. And then when you're going to HR, you have a case that you're able to present. So it's really important to document. Another one is delegate, which is more of a leadership approach. So you can delegate the situation by either separating the two people or giving advice to the other person, however you see fit. So these 5 approaches, there's not one that's better than the other. The preference depends on the person. Depending on, the situation, you'll use different approaches. So if you feel safe and comfortable, please use either or different type of intervention. But a disclaimer that I'd like to make is that, again, it's very, very important to keep in mind that your safety and security is first. So if you are going to intervene in a situation, please make sure you assess the situation well and that you know that you're safe enough to use any of the 5 different types of intervention. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I thought that was my boss. Okay, so what is the bystander intervention? So, and the steps. So the first one is assessing the event. So this means that you need to decide whether the situation is harmful or not. So, is this just some people making jokes and buddying around, or, could this be malicious? Is the person uncomfortable? And that's really the first step. And then after that, you want to be able to decide your level of personal intervention. So I discussed this earlier. One is not better than the other. It's just understanding, 1, assessing if it's safe for you to intervene, and 2, realizing what kind of intervention is most comfortable for you. And again, you never want to put yourself or the other people who are going through this situation at risk. So please, do not jeopardize your personal safety or the safety of others. The third one is let the person who was in the harmful situation know that you tried to intervene. So let's say your intervention was unsuccessful, or let's say you were too shy or you were too scared to intervene. It's very important to know to the victim or the person that experienced the discomfort or the aggression to let them know, hey, I saw that wasn't okay. I wasn't able to intervene, but I just want to let you know that I did see it and that was, a horrible experience. And one thing that we have learned making this toolkit is that acknowledgement is extremely, extremely important, especially for marginalized people who experience this. Because again, as we saw in the session earlier, a common rhetoric that we see is this idea that it doesn't happen or, it's all in your head. And then the fourth and final one is, of course, talking to somebody that about your experience. So whether you're the person that faced it and, you know, you want to talk about it, make sure you talk about it to somebody that you trust and somebody that you're comfortable with. But also, if you did experience it from a bystander point of view, it's very important to make sure you create conversations about these things and how it affected you and how you thought about it. But also make sure that, you know, if you experience secondhand trauma or whatever the case may be, that you talk to somebody about your experiences. Okay, next slide, please. So we're not going to do this scenario, but I am going to talk briefly about some of the scenarios in our toolkit. So our toolkit acknowledges that there are different types of racism. So racism and the experience that different marginalized people have are not monolithic. So not all people from marginalized groups experience the same level or the same kind of racism. So, you know, there's anti-Black racism, there's Islamophobia, there's anti-Indigenous racism. So there's different types of racism and different, you know, levels and scales. But what our toolkit does is that we talk about diverse scenarios. So what happens to this person? How would you intervene? So it's kind of helping you understand how you would apply the 4D, so the four modes of intervention, and also what would be the most efficient for the scenario. And we also find that this is very effective, especially for seniors in high school or people in high school, because it does teach them how to be, how to apply their knowledge in a real life scenario. Next slide, please.
Perfect. So we posted in the chat the anti-racism toolkit, so the bystander toolkit for teens and educators. So you have 2 copies, one in French, one in English. So just a reminder to everyone that New Brunswick is the only formal bilingual province in Canada. So for inclusivity, all of the things we're doing is in French and in English and is part of our standards and protocols, because we want to acknowledge the importance of the Acadian community who live in New Brunswick and represent 30%. So you have it here in French and in English. And the same thing, the PowerPoint can also be shared in French and English. So at the end, again, toolkit has been, so the outcomes, it's really empowerment. So it's really to bring that conversation in the classroom, to bring that conversation into the district with our education department, French and English, increase that awareness. So it's really important to use the definitions, to define, to name, so then we can empower and find a solution. This toolkit is also enhancing the skills and learn about the different definitions, the way it's shaped. It helps unpack also a lot of the scenarios there that teachers can do in class. There's a lot of series of questions that they can ask to engage that conversation. And it's also create safe spaces and inclusive environments into the schools, but also into the other it can be youth centers, or it can be even local settlement agencies. So it really creates and fosters that safe and inclusivity environments. Next slide, please.
Yeah, perfect. So, you know, this is just we were just able to kind of give a quick summary of some of the information in our toolkit. Of course, it's a little bit more elaborate than we give it credit to. So please feel free to check out our toolkit if you'd like more information about that. And also, if you'd like to know more information about NBMC's programs and services, please feel free to visit our website. We just have 2 minutes left, so I am going to give a couple seconds for any questions or comments people would like to leave about this session or Sherry's session and Dustin, sorry. Okay, I don't see any questions right now. Oh, can he stop sharing screen? Oh, okay. I don't see any questions, but I do see a comment saying thank you so much. So thank you for being able to participate at today's session. I'd like to thank Sherry, Sungun Kora. I'd like to thank Carmen and Dustin and our IT magician Patrick for helping us today behind the scenes. Again, all the links and information you need are in the chat below, so please feel free to use those links and use them in your respectful communities and continue to promote inclusion and equity in your own respected community. So thank you again for joining our session, and I wish you the best, and please enjoy the rest of the P2P. Oh, sorry, just a second. Oh, I am seeing questions right now. Okay, that's okay. We'll take an extra 2 minutes for the question. How did the reporting portal for the ISOs got started? Okay, I think that's a question for Sherry, so I'm gonna let Sherry answer that one.
What?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right. So that actually was started because there was no mechanism. We had a number of our settlement workers were receiving reports. People didn't know where to report or how to handle it or where the resources were to get some supports. And in Kelowna, one of our partners there, our equivalent, was already working with UBC on the reporting portal. So at this point, we were able to connect with them. And as a region, and when I talk about region, I'm talking about the Thompson Okanagan, we got together and thought, well, this is something that impacts more than just Central Okanagan. Can we bring it out further? And so UBC is actually kind of the driver in the background that created the portal for us. And they receive the reports, and those reports then get filtered out to the various settlement organizations in the region. There is now another reporting portal. However, we always say that it's important to have various methods, more than one way to be able to report, to get the supports that you need. And sometimes it's not about reporting further. Sometimes it's just sharing that experience and being able to say, hey, this happened to me. And so we want to give them as many venues as possible to be able to share that out. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sorry, we're still trying to figure out this tech stuff. So that was a great answer, and I do second that we need to be able to include different statistics, not just quantitative. There's also qualitative statistics. We can look at different approaches to dealing with this, because as Sherry said, in her presentation early on, a lot of surveys do not represent, or statistics don't represent, the actual numbers that we're looking for. So there is this invisible number that we tend to miss sometimes. Okay, I'm just going to check the chat one last time for any questions. Okay, I just see some comments, but I'll read them anyways and I'll wrap it up. So Tara said, thanks, very good session all around. Yulia said, thank you for sharing information. Nasreen said, you are doing a great job. So thank you so much for all the great comments and support. It is very hard work, but it's very encouraging to see that there is some great feedback. So thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of your P2P conferences. Enjoy and join as many live sessions as you can. And again, thank you for all of our speakers and hosts today. So thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate working alongside you, Sugu and Cherry. I'll see you again soon.
Bye, Dustin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dorcas. Thank you very much. Carmen as well. Take care. That was fun.